tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. And where my fathers died, land of the pilgrims thrive, from every mountainside, let freedom ring.
Here, Admiral gave us with Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs, who's a member of our post, and I'd like to call on him to give us any information he has on what's coming on.
Thanks, Commander.
Thank you, sir.
Really appreciate it. It's great to see all of you. I've actually missed the last couple of meetings because I was on the road, so I apologize.
Well, I didn't expect you to be here today, really. You just got back on
I was
Friday.
a little late, but I made it. Hey, lots of good things going on. I thought I'd just give you an update. First of all, projects I've talked about, big needs with veterans is long-term care and cemetery services. I tell veterans you don't want to be in a rush to use those services, but they're there for you. And we're trying to keep up with the demand for that. So down in Enterprise, we're still building the Command Sergeant Major Bennie G. Adkins State Veterans Home. It is on timeline. We look to open that facility in the fall of 2024. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. It's going along despite all the weather issues we've dealt with. So that's good news. That'll alleviate big demand we have in the state for long-term care. The second thing is cemetery services across the nation. Veteran cemeteries have seen increased demand over the last 10 years. We're trying to keep up with that. We're adding about 4,000 interment plots at our state veteran cemetery down in Spanish Fork. The contractor just finished that work last week and the state signed off on it. It's actually a beautiful addition. Both in full body burials and cremated remains plot sites down there. So we're going to have a dedication and consecration ceremony for that new acreage on March 26th. So that's good news. We're keeping up with the demand in Alabama. Last week, I was in Washington, D.C., believe it or not. There's an annual meeting of all of the state directors of Veterans Affairs and senior VA officials. So the Secretary of VA and all the undersecretaries are there. Really good discussions, some good, some not so good news, and I'll try to give you the high points. Good news is there's increased discussion about how do we address veterans who are exposed to toxins, and everybody knows about the PACT Act. And we're about a year and a half into the PACT Act. It's caused about a 50% increase in the number of claims coming in. Now, there's a good news story with that and a bad news story. The good news is the word is getting out to veterans, and veterans are applying for those PACT Act benefits. The bad news is, and I know you all talked about this last month, there's a backlog of claims, and it's pretty big. It's taken about 7 to 9 months to get claims adjudicated. And there's also a backlog of over 200,000 appeals of claims, so the appeal system has a backlog. The federal VA is hiring people. It's kind of plateauing now, thank goodness. For about a year to a year and a half, the backlog was getting bigger. It seems like it's plateaued now. The last few months it's leveled off, so I think they're going to start catching up now. But yeah, there is a backlog. The other big discussion when we all gathered last week was mental health of veterans. And that's a big issue. And I talk about this all the time in Alabama. People throw out the term crisis all the time, but I think in Alabama, we have reached kind of crisis proportions. Some of the statistics in Alabama, when you look at things like opioid addictions and the suicide rate for veterans, they disproportionately affect veterans. Veterans are twice as likely to be addicted to opioids. Some of that has been self-inflicted by the VA system, to be honest with you. Because for so many years, the answer to physical and mental wounds that veterans face was, here's a bottle of pills, go take these. The suicide rate in Alabama is still twice as high for veterans as it is for the general public. Now, some good news. This morning at 5 a.m., I knew this last week, we were given a sneak preview, but at 5 a.m. this morning, the VA, the federal VA, put out a press release. And I'm going to read just the opening portions of this. This is a pretty monumental announcement. and one of the largest ever expansions of veterans health care. All veterans exposed to toxins and other hazards during military service at home or abroad will be eligible for VA health care beginning March 5th. Now I'm sure VFW headquarters, they just got this news release at 5 a.m. this morning, literally, and they'll be putting out more details. But here's a little more. Today, literally today, VA announced that all veterans who were exposed to toxins and other hazards while serving in the military, at home or abroad, will be eligible to enroll directly in VA healthcare beginning March 5th, 2024. This means that all veterans who served in the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Global War on Terror, or any other combat zone after 9/11 will be eligible to enroll directly in VA healthcare without first applying for VA benefits. So you don't have to have a disability rating to enroll in the VA healthcare system. Additionally, veterans who never deployed but were exposed to toxins or hazards while training or on active duty in the United States will also be eligible to enroll. That is a major development, a major expansion. So more to come. You're the first to hear about this, I think, because literally when I walked in this morning to the office, I had this news release waiting. The VA secretary told state directors but asked us to embargo it until today. So let's probably get some news coverage, and all of the veteran service organizations will put out more to come. So that's huge news. So that's at the federal level, some things going on. Here's some things going on in addition to what we're doing in our department, some things going on at the legislature these days. So I talked about the opioid crisis. There has been a multi-state settlement with pharmaceutical companies and distributors of opioids. Billions of dollars in illegal settlement. Alabama is going to get almost $300 million in that settlement, believe it or not. The State Board of Veterans Affairs and others have asked the Opioid Settlement Commission, which I sit on, to set aside 25% of those settlement funds and specifically earmark them for veterans, for mental health, especially for opioid addiction and recovery. Now, if that were the case, we're talking almost $70 million to be earmarked for veterans care in this state. Commander was there a few weeks ago. I did an 18-minute presentation on the crisis of opioids and mental health for veterans in the state, saying we need to do more to support mental health needs of veterans in the state of Alabama. So we'll see what comes out of that, but that's our ask, is do not forget about veterans when this money is being distributed. There's another development in the House. Representative Chip Brown from the Mobile area, who is a veteran, has introduced a bill. It's House Bill 197 and Senate Bill 135. Very comprehensive bill covering health care for veterans. Now, frankly, I don't know what's going to happen with that bill, because it's an awfully big bill that would really augment health care for veterans in the state of Alabama and purportedly put some state dollars behind that. So more to come on that. The good news in both of those, in the opioid settlement and what's going on in the State House, and they're in session right now, is there seems to be a growing recognition we need to do more for veterans in the state. Other states are doing things that we're kind of behind on. So if nothing else, that's kind of heartening to hear that people are actually talking about veterans at the state level and not just saying, well, that's a federal responsibility. They seem to realize, no, there's a responsibility for the state of Alabama to help with care of veterans as well. So I think that is really good news. It shows there's an awareness that's growing at the state capitol. So I think that's a victory in itself. Hey, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the military things going on in the state, because I'm a big believer in that continuum. Military veteran status, you serve for your life as a veteran. So about 2 weeks ago, I went out to the 187th Air Wing, and they had a great welcoming ceremony and mini air show for the F-35s that are replacing the F-16s that were at the 187th. They did a great job. They had a welcoming ceremony, and then the next day they had an air show on a family day. One of the coolest things I've ever seen. They had formation flying with a P-51 Mustang, an F-16 Fighting Falcon, and an F-35 Lightning II aircraft flying in formation, did a flyover and did some formation flying. I mean, it was awe-inspiring, and it represented the whole history of the 187th. But I think they have.
The red tails, all of them were red tail.
They sure were. Yeah, they got authority to paint one of their F-35s with a red tail. So they're getting the F-35s. I think they have 3 now.
Yes.
The last count, but they're going to continue to get more. That is a huge development for the Alabama Air National Guard that they got F-35s. At the same time, the 908 out at Maxwell Air Force Reserve is in transition. The C-130s went away. They're shortly going to get helicopters as they transition from fixed wing to rotary wing. So that's a big development as well, because there were dangers at times that those flying units could have gone away. It was a political battle to win continuing missions for those military units is a big win for Alabama. And of course, all that's a sneak preview to the air show that's coming to Maxwell, April 6th and 7th, I think are the dates. So don't forget that. And we're encouraging all veterans to go out there. I'm biased, the Blue Angels are going to fly. So come out and see a good Navy air show. But it's important for veterans to show up and show that we're here. We're a big part of the community. We're 400,000 people in the state of Alabama, and we need to make our presence known. And I think that's all I wanted to tell everybody, Commander, but I'll be glad to answer any questions or anybody.
So with this expansion of eligibility for the VA system, was there any announcement or talk last week that was not on Margaret about the expansion of VA for primary care physicians? Because that's going to be one of the limits, I think.
Yeah, look, this is personal. At 2 o'clock, I have an appointment at the VA outpatient clinic in Chantilly. They've been pretty upfront that they have staffing issues. And when I heard this announcement, I thought, it's almost like with the PACT Act, how are you going to keep up with the number of claims that are going to come in? But with this, I think you're vastly expanding healthcare. How are you going to keep up with that demand? That's for the feds to figure out. I hope they've got a plan, but it's a real issue. I'll give you an example. Talk about mental health. I think they've released this publicly, but they are woefully understaffed when it comes to mental health services in Alabama. And what's even worse, under the Mission Act and other federal laws that have passed, they can refer people out into community care. But Alabama ranks towards the bottom in availability of mental health services in the civilian community as well. So when I say we're at crisis proportions in Alabama for veterans mental health, I really mean it. And I do sound the alarm bells with elected officials all the time that we've got to be serious about fixing this issue. It's great to send out press releases and say we're going to expand healthcare, but you got to follow up with the assets to cover it, because I face it like everybody else. I've had appointments canceled, and it's an issue. Yes, sir.
For the Blue Angel show, is there any handicap parking or front row seating available?
Well, they'll have to have handicap accessibility considered as part of the air show, I'm sure. As far as specialized seating, I don't know. We're not directly involved in the show. We are going to have a booth set up for Veterans Affairs, both the feds and the state. So that's another reason to come out and get information about benefits and services available. I'm going to meet with the air show folks this Friday, so I'll try to get an answer. I would think they're going to have some kind of accessibility plans.
For previous shows, they had a special section you could buy for maybe $250 to have front row seating and special parking and chairs that you can sit in and watch.
Yeah, this is the first air show they've had probably about 7 years, because they had one scheduled during COVID and canceled it at the last minute when COVID hit. So it's been a while. But every air show I've ever been involved in had accessibility for disabled as part of their plans.
Lieutenant Colonel Storm, or Hoffman, I was hoping she would be here today, but in an email she sent me, and I've got to get that information. There is VIP seating and some things like that. I don't know what the details are about how to do applying for that. If I get that, I'll send that out in an email with a contact of who to contact about that. But I know the VFW, our post is planning to have a table out there. So we're gonna need, that's 8 to 5, 2 days. So that's gonna be something to man that with a couple of people for the full duration of those 2 days. So we'll be asking about that at the March meeting. And we'll have to be ready to jump on it right away because we meet and then it's a week, not quite 2 weeks before the air show happens. And but we'll get out more information.
You can run back. I'll run back.
Yes, sir. Have you heard any discussion on the movement to get Fort McClellan declared as one of the
Great question.
polluted zones?
Yeah, I actually had that in my notes and I forgot that. Yeah, great question. So I talked to both federal VA officials. This is a hot issue. A little history. The PACT Act, the original version of the PACT Act had really strong protections for Fort McClellan and listed it basically as a presumptive site for toxic exposure and automatic connection with service and healthcare issues. Somewhere, and I don't know how it happened, somewhere in the amendments that all got taken out and it was replaced with an order to the federal VA to do an epidemiological study of Fort McClellan veterans. I gotta tell you personally, I wasn't real happy with that because you saw the protections that we put in for Camp Lejeune and we all get the TV ads and we've been warning people to be very careful about who you go see to file a claim. But it's a hot topic. I get calls all the time from all over the country asking, what's going on with Fort McClellan veterans? Why are we left out of the mix when it comes to toxic exposure? I've talked to the VA secretary about it. One interesting development, it was about 2 weeks ago, for the first time ever, the federal VA published a new list recognizing for the first time ever that herbicides, including Agent Orange, Bennie, were actually stored here in the United States in CONUS, and they set up certain sites as presumptive sites for toxic exposures. One of them was in Mobile, Alabama, where DOD and VA have finally admitted, yeah, we stored massive amounts of herbicide, especially during Vietnam, and a lot of service members were exposed there. So it created some new presumptive sites. I was a little disappointed that Fort McClellan was not on the list. If you don't know the history of Fort McClellan, the Army Chemical School was there, so everything from mustard agent to VXGB nerve agent, herbicides, you name it, they used it there. And I hear all the time, almost every single day, from veterans and veterans advocacy groups around the country about chronic health issues linked with service at Fort McClellan. We are on record, the State Board of Veterans Affairs unanimously passed a resolution in support of those veterans, urging VA and Congress to do more. The state legislature unanimously passed a resolution urging the U.S. Congress and the VA to do more to support Fort McClellan veterans. I'm going to say something to you. So that's another reason that I say, do not forget, we are 400,000 strong in this state of veterans. When you add in family members and active duty military, you're talking almost a quarter of the population of Alabama. We don't have expensive lobbyists that represent us, that wine and dine elected officials. Well, we have a lot of people, and that represents a lot of votes. And we need to make our voices known. If anybody has earned the right to bend the ear of elected officials, it's us. I mean it. And don't ever forget that. You need to remind our elected officials that we're here, and a lot of you and your family members have sacrificed a lot. And a lot of those elected officials, everything that they have garnered in life is because of the sacrifice of veterans. And we need to remind them of that sometimes. And the Fort McClellan issue is a prime example. I know it was a wrong way to answer, but we keep pushing, and I promise you we'll keep advocating for that. I'll be glad to answer any other questions if you want to come up to me after. Don't ever forget also, we have 62 veteran service offices in the state of Alabama. You're always welcome there, free of charge, to assist with any of your veterans issues, claims, services, you name Yes, sir.
Just one question. Are they still considering allowing illegal aliens to receive medical care at VA?
Another great question. So I get asked about that all the time. So there's been a story that veterans are being displaced from VA health care because the VA is providing health care to illegal immigrants. So I want you to hear this, and I've got two witnesses to this, Jeff Newton and Sandra Lucas. So I keep hearing this, and one of our senators from Alabama has made that direct allegation. So last week, in front of about 200 people, the VA secretary was talking and said, does anybody have any questions? I raised my hand. And in front of all those people, I said, Mr. Secretary, first I thanked him. He really is a good guy. I mean that. McDonough is a good guy. I said, selected politicians have made the allegation that veterans are being displaced from VA health care because VA is providing health care for illegal immigrants. Can you address that? And he did very directly in front of 200 people. He said, let me say this very plainly. He said, VA is not providing health care for illegal immigrants, period. He said, we provide 2 items of support for immigration and customs enforcement. He went into detail. The first is, he said, we have mobile mental health teams that go down to the border and provide mental health services for ICE agents, immigration and custom enforcement agents who are veterans, because he said many of them are combat veterans, and they have to do things like pull dead bodies out of the river. And he said, we go to them and provide mental health services for those veterans. He said, that's one thing we do. He said, secondly, since 2002, we've had what's called an Economy Act agreement with Immigration and Customs Enforcement to help them with financial services. He said less than 10 employees in VA are involved in that out of the 400,000 employees in VA, to help them process medical bills that ICE incurs. And he said, that's it. That's the only support we provide to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. He said, I don't know where this conspiracy theory started that we're displacing veterans like at the VA Medical Center here in Montgomery and taking in illegal immigrants. Now, I got to take the man at his word. This is a cabinet level official, and he said this in front of 200 people. I get emails making these allegations, but when I've confronted lower level officials, they say, we don't know where that conspiracy theory is coming from. Somebody's putting it out there, and they don't know where it's coming from. I have to take them at the word. I've never had a VA official lie to me, one thing. And look, we have a good partnership with him. We can talk all day about some of the shortcomings in the VA system, but I've never had an official just blatantly lie to me. So I gotta take the VA secretary at his word. I put him on the spot in front of 200 people personally. So I hope that addresses it. What else? Anything else? Yes, sir.
I've seen on Facebook, YouTube, some of the commentators for VA, for veterans, and they've said that some of the same community care providers are being sent through immigration to the same doctors. And they're claiming that the billing is the same for VA as it is for immigration, and they're getting them commingled.
Yeah.
And they're billing VA for the services that are going to the veterans, to
That's
the
interesting.
immigrants.
Now there may be some truth in that, because as I said, one of the things that the VA secretary noted was their financial services people do provide services to ICE on assisting with billing. And that would most likely be community care providers. So you do have about 10 VA officials, is what he said. That's the figure he quoted, 10 VA officials that assist ICE with medical billing. So I mean, that might be.
That's what they were saying, that it's nationwide,
Yeah.
where they have community care.
Yeah, and you understand, I'm just telling you exactly what I heard from the VA secretary's mouth, face to face.
That might be something at your level you can address back, or
I
they
will.
commingling billing from ICE to VA to the community care, and you can't tell which one's which, so they have to pay it.
Okay. I will. I'll ask about that. That's a good question. Thanks, Commander.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
As always, a wealth of information from our ADVA commissioner and member of our post. So we are, we're very fortunate to be able to get that information firsthand. I would like to, I said this last meeting and I forgot when we opened, been trying to occasionally send around a picture of what our post did back in the day. So this is a community support post from Post 96 in 1957. In 1957, our post members and auxiliary conducted a March of Dimes campaign. The origins of the March of Dimes started just before World War II and started with the battle against polio on a national basis. It demonstrated the enormous value of an appeal for an inexpensive participation by everyone, young and old, rich or poor, by simply contributing a dime. So this is a picture of our, I'm guessing there was not any information about who the individuals are, other than they were post members and auxiliary members. So I will pass that around. That'll go this way. A little bit later, Brian Peters will talk about this, but I'm going to send this around. We'll send it the other way. It's a press release about the spelling bee and some pictures in there with the winter information and everything. So I'm going to pass that around this way. We'll move on now to committee reports, and I'd like to recognize Brian Peters for talk about our spelling bee and the success thereof.
All right, we had a great turnout for the spelling bee. It was a very impressive performance by the students. They were very good. There was a little trouble getting there, but once we got there, I think everything went well. We had moved it to St. James. We only had one person fall on the wet floor in the front, but he already had a Purple Heart and he's not going to get another one. So, I also want to thank, I want to thank Commander for being there. I want to thank Charles for being there with the checkbook. I want to thank those out there, you were there.
Yes, sir.
And I especially want to thank, and Mark, I especially want to thank Bill Chevrolet because he had to fill in as a judge. He stepped in and did a great job there. But it was a great turnout, and my understanding is we got on the front page of the Independent. I haven't seen that yet. Paul's going to get it to me tomorrow. But it was a great event. I learned a lot this year, and I'm going to have everything in a folder so I can just hand it off if necessary. No, I enjoy doing it too. But it's a great event, and there were some glitches that we had that I'm going to have to work on next year to make sure we don't have that problem again. But it was a great job, and thanks everybody for if you weren't there, we were there in spirit. So thank you very much for that.
Well, let's give Brian a hand, because that's a lot involved in coordinating between all the schools and them notifying you of their winners. And you can imagine, the counselors or whoever's handling that within the school, they got 3,000 other things they're dealing with. They have a monumental set of things to worry about. And a lot of times taking care of the students and their educational priorities sometimes gets overshadowed by the bureaucracy. And that's what I think makes a lot of difficulty for Brian in trying to get this stuff handled. And so it's a lot of worry, a lot of, hey, can you follow up with me? I need to know your winners. Did y'all have a spelling bee? So it's miraculous that we had the schools that we did that turned out, and that the bee went off very well. And so kudos to our junior vice commander and Montgomery County spelling bee coordinator for all his work.